Hello everybody, welcome back to our third lecture in the International Economics course. In this lecture we will continue explaining Chapter 2, the Law of Comparative Advantage. The main points of this lecture are the labor theory of value, the opportunity cost theory, the production possibility frontier under constant costs, opportunity costs and relative commodity prices, the basis for and the gains from trade under constant costs. Comparative advantage and the labor theory of value. Ricardo based his law of comparative advantage on a number of assumptions, which are only two nations and two commodities, free trade, perfect mobility of labor within each nation, but immobility between the two nations, constant costs of production, no transportation costs, no technical change, the labor theory of value. Let's explain the labor theory of value. Under the labor theory of value, the value or price of a commodity depends completely on the amount of labor going into the production of the commodity. This implies that either labor is the only factor of production, or labor is used in the same fixed proportion in the production of all commodities, or labor is homogeneous, which means of only one type. Neither of these assumptions is true. For example, much more capital equipment per worker is required to produce some products, such as steel, than to produce other products, such as textiles. In addition, there is usually some possibility of substitution between labor capital and other factors in the production of most commodities. Furthermore, labor is not homogeneous, but varies greatly in training, productivity, and wages. At the very least, we should allow for different productivities of labor. Since neither of these assumptions is true, we can't base the explanation of comparative advantage on the labor theory of value. Therefore, the theory of comparative advantage can be explained on the basis of the opportunity cost theory. Let's explain what do we mean by the opportunity cost theory. The opportunity cost theory. In 1936, Hepler explained the theory of comparative advantage on the opportunity cost theory. In this form, the law of comparative advantage is sometimes referred to as the law of comparative cost. According to the opportunity cost theory, the cost of a commodity is the amount of a second commodity that must be given up to release just enough resources to produce one additional unit of the first commodity. No assumption is made here that labor is the only factor of production or that labor is homogeneous, nor is it assumed that the cost or price of a commodity depends on or can be derived completely from its labor content. Consequently, the nation with the lower opportunity cost in the production of a commodity has a comparative advantage in that commodity and a comparative disadvantage in the second commodity. Let's see an example. If in the absence of trade, the United States must give up 2/3 of a unit of cloth to release just enough resources to produce one additional unit of wheat domestically, then the opportunity cost of wheat is 2/3 of a unit of cloth. On the other hand, if the United Kingdom must give up 2 units of cloth to release just enough resources to produce one additional unit of wheat domestically, then the opportunity cost of wheat is 2 units of cloth. Therefore, the opportunity cost of wheat in terms of the amount of cloth that must be given up is lower in the United States than in the United Kingdom, and the United States would have a comparative or cost advantage over the United Kingdom in wheat. Note that in a two-nation, two-commodity world, the United Kingdom would have a comparative or cost advantage in cloth. According to the Law of Comparative Advantage, the United States should specialize in producing wheat and export some of it in exchange for British cloth. This is exactly what we concluded earlier with the Law of Comparative Advantage, based on the labor theory of value. But now our explanation is based on the opportunity cost theory. The production possibility frontier under constant costs. Opportunity costs can be illustrated with the production possibility frontier or transformation curve. The production possibility frontier is a curve that shows the alternative combinations of the two commodities that a nation can produce by fully utilizing all of its resources with the best technology available to it. The following table gives the production possibility schedules of wheat in million bushels per year and the cloth in million yards per year for the United States and the United Kingdom. Table 2.4 shows that the United States can produce 180 bushels of wheat and 0 yards of cloth, or 150 bushels of wheat and 20 yards of cloth, or 120 bushels of wheat and 40 yards of cloth, down to 0 bushels of wheat and 120 yards of cloth, which means for each 30 bushels of wheat, the United States gives up just enough resources are released to produce an additional 20 yards of cloth. That's 30 bushels of wheat equal 20 yards of cloth, in the sense that both require the same amount of resources. Thus, the opportunity cost of 1 unit of wheat in the United States is 1 bushel of wheat equal 2/3 unit of cloth, which is constant. On the other hand, the United Kingdom can produce 60 bushels of wheat and 0 yards of cloth, or 50 bushels of wheat and 20 yards of cloth, or 40 bushels of wheat and 40 yards of cloth, down to 0 bushels of wheat and 120 yards of cloth, which means for each 10 bushels of wheat that the United Kingdom gives up, just enough resources are released to produce an additional 20 yards of cloth. That is 10 bushels of wheat equal 20 yards of cloth, in the sense that both require the same amount of resources. Thus, the opportunity cost of 1 unit of wheat in the United Kingdom is 1 bushel of wheat equal 2 yards of cloth, which is constant. The United States and the United Kingdom production possibility schedules, given in the previous table, are graphed as production possibility frontiers in the following figure. Each point on a frontier represents one combination of wheat and cloth that the nation can produce. For example, at point A, the United States produces 90 bushels of wheat and 60 yards of cloth, while at point A dash, the United Kingdom produces 40 bushels of wheat and 40 yards of cloth. Note that points inside or below the production possibility frontier are also possible, but are inefficient, in the sense that the nation has some idle resources or is not using the best technology available to it. On the other hand, points above the production frontier can't be achieved with the resources and technology available to the nation. Note also that the downward or negative slope of the production possibility frontiers indicates that if the United States and the United Kingdom want to produce more wheat, they must give up some of their cloth production. For example, for each additional 1 bushel of wheat to be produced, the United States must give up 2/3 yards of cloth, and the United Kingdom must give up 2 yards of cloth, no matter from which point on its production possibility frontier the nation starts. Accordingly, the fact that the opportunity costs of both nations are constant reflects the fact that the production prosperity frontiers are straight lines. Constant opportunity costs arise when resources or factors of production are either perfect substitutes for each other or used in fixed proportion in the production of both commodities. All units of the same factor are homogeneous or of exactly the same quality. Then, as each nation transfers resources from the production of cloth to the production of wheat, it will not have to use resources that are less and less suited to wheat production, no matter how much wheat it's already producing. The same is true for the production of more cloth. Thus, we have constant costs in the sense that the same amount of one commodity must be given up to produce each additional unit of the second commodity. Although opportunity costs are constant in each nation, they differ among nations, providing the basis for trade. Finally, note that constant costs are not realistic. However, they are discussed only because they serve as a convenient introduction to the more realistic case of increasing costs that we will explain in the next chapter. Opportunity costs and relative commodity prices. We have seen that the opportunity cost of wheat is equal to the amount of cloth that the nation must give up to release just enough resources to produce one additional unit of wheat. This is given by the slope of the production possibility frontier or transformation curve, and is sometimes referred to as the marginal rate of transformation. The previous figure shows that the slope of the United States transformation curve is equal 120 divided 180 equal 2/3 equal opportunity cost of wheat in the United States and remains constant, while the slope of the United Kingdom transformation curve equal 120 divided 60 equal 2 equal opportunity cost of wheat in the United Kingdom and remains constant. On the assumption that prices equal costs of production and that the nation does produce both some wheat and some cloth, the opportunity cost of wheat is equal to the price of wheat relative to the price of cloth. Thus, in the United States, the price of wheat relative to the price of cloth equal 2/3, and inversely, the price of cloth relative to the price of wheat equal 3/2 equal 1.5. While in the United Kingdom, the price of wheat relative to the price of cloth equal 2, and inversely, the price of cloth relative to the price of wheat equal 1/2. Accordingly, the lower price of wheat relative to the price of cloth in the United States is a reflection of its comparative advantage in wheat. Similarly, the lower price of cloth relative to the price of wheat in the United Kingdom reflects its comparative advantage in cloth. Note that under constant costs, price of wheat relative to price of cloth is determined exclusively by production or supply considerations in each nation. On the other hand, demand considerations don't enter at all in the determination of relative commodity prices. Finally, to conclude, we can say that the difference in relative commodity prices between the two nations is a reflection of their comparative advantage and provides the basis for mutually beneficial trade. The basis for and the gains from trade under constant costs In the absence of trade, a nation can only consume the commodities that it produces. If the United States chooses to produce and consume combination A, at which it produces 90 bushels of wheat and 60 yards of cloth on its production possibility frontier, and the United Kingdom might choose combination A- at which it produces 40 bushels of wheat and 40 yards of cloth. With trade possible, the United States would specialize in the production of wheat, which is the commodity of its comparative advantage, and produce at point B, at which it produces 180 bushels of wheat and 0 yards of cloth on its production possibility frontier. Similarly, the United Kingdom would specialize in the production of cloth, which is the commodity of its comparative advantage, and produce at point P- at which it produces 0 bushels of wheat and 120 yards of cloth. Suppose that the United States exchanges 70 bushels of wheat for 70 yards of cloth with the United Kingdom. With trade, the United States specializes in the production of wheat, as it produced 180 bushels of wheat and 0 yards of cloth. It will give the United Kingdom 70 bushels of wheat and get from the United Kingdom 70 yards of cloth. As a result, it ends up consuming at point E 110 bushels of wheat and 70 yards of cloth. On the other hand, the United Kingdom will specialize in the production of cloth. It will produce 120 yards of cloth and 0 bushels of wheat. It will get from the United States 70 bushels of wheat and give the United States 70 yards of cloth. As a result, the United Kingdom ends up consuming at E- 70 bushels of wheat and 50 yards of cloth. Thus, the United States gains 20 bushels of wheat and 10 yards of cloth from trade, and the United Kingdom gains 30 bushels of wheat and 10 yards of cloth from trade. The increased consumption of both wheat and cloth in both nations was made possible by the increased output that resulted as each nation specialized in the production of the commodity of its comparative advantage. Thus, in the absence of trade, the United States produced 90 bushels of wheat and the United Kingdom produced 40 bushels of wheat, for a total of 130 bushels of wheat. While with specialization in production and trade, 180 bushels of wheat are produced, all in the United States. Similarly, in the absence of trade, the United States produced 60 yards of cloth and the United Kingdom produced 40 yards of cloth, for a total of 100 yards of cloth. With specialization in production and trade, 120 yards of cloth are produced, all in the United Kingdom. It's this increase in output of 50 bushels of wheat and 20 yards of cloth resulting from specialization in production that is shared by the United States and the United Kingdom and represents their gains from trade. Even though the simple Ricardian trade model has been empirically verified to a large extent, it has a serious shortcoming in that it assumes rather than explains comparative advantage, and Ricardo and classical economists in general provided no explanation for the difference in labor productivity and comparative advantage between nations, and they couldn't say much about the effect of international trade on the earnings of factors of production. By providing answers to both of these important questions, the Heckscher-Ohlin model theoretically improves on and extends the Ricardian model.